Good evening and welcome to our first ever Tactile studio. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us this evening here at Hobson's Choice. And I'm Maddie DeFazio-Wright. I'm Director of Partnerships here at Hobson's Choice, and I am welcomed by three extraordinary guests this evening. And tonight we explore colour, texture, light, and how they all combine to shape atmosphere and the character of architectural spaces. So I wanted to start off with one of the big questions, and it's one that often comes up in design circles, actually. Helen, do architects fear colour?
Definitely, they run a mile when they see me.
I think architects do fear colour. I agree with Jo, I think that's changing, but we are designing for a long period of time.
Yeah.
For, when we're looking at projects, we're expecting them to have a lifespan of 50 years, if not 100 years. And, if you go in with bold colours, they're not necessarily going to last. They can be quite fashion-led. So I think you've got to be a little bit gentle with architects if they're looking at more sort of calm, neutral tones, because they do have to last.
That's really interesting, actually, because how long would you say, Cassie, that you would design kitchens to last?
I was about to say, I think we designed them for about 20 years, so we're kind of in the same ballpark. The way that we design, it's not to sort of feel as if tomorrow you're not going to like that colour. It really needs to be timeless and last a really long period of time, so you need to make sure that what you choose is you're going to love it tomorrow and for 20 years.
Yeah.
Totally honest.
Because if you're designing for generations, I guess, and Cassie, you're designing for 20 years or something, Jo, is there a difference with some of the colour curation and colour consultancy that you do?
Well, the consultancy that I do, which I do make all the colours and do the names, as we said, but I spend most of my time helping people choose colours. And that is not, it's nothing like those sort of timescales. I'm looking at possibly 5 to 7 years. Most people will change a colour in a room, unless you're me, who does it every 5 to 7 weeks, obviously. No, I think that's the most important thing. There are no rules when it comes to colour. There are certain things which I promote quite heavily, but it's all about what you feel comfortable with. There are tips and hints, like don't paint your skirting white because it's going to foreshorten the room, very obvious things like that, but they're not rules. They're just there to be interpreted.
Well, I think, a lot of the people here are creative, so I wonder whether or not there are any principles of colour that perhaps you might be able to share with us, Joa. Was there a conversation that the two of you had earlier about understanding your neutrals is the basis towards then adding colour onto it?
Yes, Helen was saying that's one of the things she feels very strongly about. So I just picked out these neutral groups because I think it is, particularly when we're talking about with materials, with metals, which obviously are much more reflective and work better with cooler, bluer neutrals, which I'll go through them very quickly, and stones and woods work much better with colours because they absorb light, with much sort of warmer tones. So this has been my sort of life's mission for the last 20-30 years, is just creating these groups, because then you know that you can use them, any of those 4 colours you can use in any way. So one can be on the trim, one can be on the wall, one can be on the ceiling. In any combination, they will always work. So my first love are these ones here. I'm sorry, can you see? The top left, what we call the traditional neutrals, which have this sort of green undertone, and wherever you paint them, they look like they've been there forever. So actually, in some architectural situations, very, very useful. Then you get probably the most popular colours at the moment of the neutrals, which are shaded white. They're what we call the timeless neutrals, but they're just a little bit less green, a little bit less grey. Then you get more grey. These were the ones which was a sort of mania for in the last 10 years. A sort of slight monster of our own making, I think. Cornforth white, etc. And then you get the very cool what we call the architectural neutrals. So these have a blue base. And of course, if you have something metal, it's going to work. This has actually got a particular hue to it, but it's actually more likely to work with these grey, cooler colours than it is with the traditional neutrals. Which actually, in this case, these work beautifully here with the Elephant's Breath and Skimming Stone group, which everybody probably knows about. And whereas if you have some stone or some wood, you're better probably with these red-based neutrals, including, I'm trying not to say Joe is white, including Dimity and Oxford Stone, etc. Because they're a little bit sort of more absorbent. And these are the yellow-based neutrals, which have gone incredibly out of fashion. Nobody wants to use anything which has a yellow base. But, I mean, I may be wrong, but mark my words, we will be back with these warm... actually, people are really rejecting these and coming right back to here because they feel like they're related to nature. And, so it's much more... they're much easier to live with. And actually, I think it's just worth saying... in this, at the moment, I think the most relevant neutrals for the moment are these two, which are called Stirabout and Jitney, and they have that slight grey underlining grey to them, but they are really warm and they will glow in any situation. So it's just, I think, getting your head round these groups, and they are on the colour chart in groups, so you can actually see them. And as I say, you can use them in any combination. Can I just show that image? This is a kitchen, not how your beautiful Hobson.
We just said we're polar opposites, but it's fine. They both completely work.
It's just, it's so charming, this kitchen. It's in Connecticut, but it's something very different. But that is painted in schoolhouse white and drop cloth. And I think it just shows that how when you put the darker colour on the wooden elements, not only does it ground it, but it just, because they feel a little bit more, the sort of wood feels it's absorbing the light a little bit more than the plaster on the walls, which is lighter. And obviously, if you want to feel rooms to feel bigger and lighter, put the lighter colour on the biggest surface, which is the walls, and the darker colour on the trim. And that's just a really easy trick.
I was just going to go back to your question on sort of why we fear colour.
Yeah.
And I think from our perspective, it's more sort of timing. So this element of colour, for me, I think would come in slightly later in my stage. I think I would start to look at sort of just the bare bones of what we've got and then approach the colour. So I think it's not that we're sort of initially perhaps scared to address it to start with, but it's just when we'd bring it in, I think.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
I mean, I the way I work, we've found this fascinating talking to each other because Helen is thinking about colour maybe 5 years in advance. Yeah?
Yeah, well, I work on projects for 2 to 3.
Yeah. And I'm working, I mean, I go into people's houses and I have an hour to choose colours for 5, well, probably 7 rooms. So it's working in a completely different way. So Helen is obsessing about it in a really good way, whereas I don't have that
Slightly
chance.
unhealthy way.
Well, I don't have that chance. I have to react really quickly. And I mean, it is my work, you're doing far more important things with, whatever buildings. Whereas I am only dealing with colour, but I have to react very, very quickly. So it's just a very different way of thinking.
Yeah, it makes a huge amount of sense. And when you go through some of the undertones to these neutrals, you talk about greens and you talk about reds and you talk about the warmer tones like the yellows. Does that then indicate to you which direction you then go in when you're choosing what we would probably all think is the real colour?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't ever, nowadays, I wouldn't show these to clients because everybody's so obsessed with colour. So, they really want to give it, but certainly, yeah, it would give me an indication. And I mean, I so rarely use a lighter colour on the trim, on the skirtings, etc. But if I did, it would come from one of these groups. Although I'm quite into bright white woodwork at the moment. I know. There's something very unfussy and sort of fresh about it. But anyway, it does make rooms look smaller though, because you're noticing all the bits. There's the window, there's the door. Whereas if you do a more complementary white or indeed you use the same colour as the walls, then the rooms always feel bigger.
Cassie, is there anything from a kitchen perspective where you can combine colour and texture together?
I think we'd start to look, this is a good example actually, that this really shows that a contemporary kitchen can work in a sort of a different area. So something that's not so contemporary in the background or with different textures behind it can still really work with quite a stark island and quite a modern looking kitchen. I think it's just how you sort of juxtapose and contrast those that makes this really work. And I think whether you choose to contrast or bring in textures through your background and what you've got surrounding really helps to make it sort of sing. And that's why I really like this, because with ball top kitchens there is that connotation that we do get told a lot, oh, it's too modern, it won't work with my property, or we've got too much and it's too busy, it won't work. This, I think, is a good example of
how it does work, how it does. And combining that texture and colour, but sometimes the texture doesn't come from the kitchen.
No.
The texture can come elsewhere. Which actually, happily, I've got a picture of the texture coming from the kitchen.
So yeah, this is the one that leads into how it doesn't really have to be colour, that's what we're looking for. This is the material that's bringing the colour. So we choose woods a lot in our kitchens. This is an apple wood. So it's how that material is bringing the colour into the kitchen. So whether it's got an earthy tone to it, whether it's got a more sort of a stark tone with the stainless steel, I think those materials and textures can really add to a design.
But nothing matches?
No, so it is slightly offset. So it's a book match, but not
mismatch
book match that we've got going on here. But you can have it so that it's...
What's book match?
Where it follows through.
So it's almost as though the grain of the wood follows the whole way through. And this is what intentionally
doing it so that it's mismatched.
Yeah. I love this kitchen because it's the same principles as I would use with paint, in as much as bringing in something quite strong and bold. If you keep it below your eye level, it's unbelievable the difference it makes. It isn't scary at all. So whether it's an island or it's the underside of a bath or something like that, you just accept it, and it's sort of very grounding. And also having something dark centrally is great because it makes everything around it feel lighter and brighter.
Yeah, and I think if you had another texture in there, I think it would be too much. But I think it's just really nice here how it's just the focal point that you're looking at that material.
Yeah, I agree. But also having the flat panels rather than lots of frame design just allows that texture to be what it's all
sort
about.
Of monolithic kind of look.
From an architectural perspective, is there anything that you would consider something that you said there's no rules. There must be some principles that you stick to. Is there anything that you'd say, I wouldn't do that? Be very careful about doing that when designing.
What is the design generator that has that hooks you into the project? And once you work that out, everything else slots in. The projects I've worked on that have just unravelled have been where we haven't nailed that at the start and really articulated it to our clients so that we're all on the same board, because then they say, what about this? Or I've been to this hotel, and you're like, no, but there's, so you have to get that design principle. And interestingly, I was talking to somebody just before we came up here, and they were saying, I painted my living room Gerald's white. And now I'm picking my curtains, and maybe I should have picked my curtains before I picked the paint colour on the walls. And
I mean, I feel strongly about that because I think it's so much easier to find a colour which will match your curtains than the other way around. I mean, I always say to people, give me the hard work. If you find a fabric or, then I will find a colour which will work with it.
I actually did want to talk, but some of these colours that you've spoken about, Joa, are going to be affected by light. And we can talk about neutrals, but we could also talk about real colour, if I'm allowed to say that, and how that perhaps is impacted by, how real colour is impacted by light, and any tips or tricks that you've used that you might be able to share with us.
I mean, that's why I feel incredibly lucky that I came across Farrow Ball, or they came across me 30 years ago, because this paint is so heavily pigmented. That's why it changes so much in different light conditions, which is what makes it feel really alive. It makes it feel that's what's special about it. Are the rules better? I mean, one of the things which really interests me is and I think you two as well, is how people use rooms. I mean, it's their homes, it's how they live in them. And so I think especially post-pandemic, we spend a lot of time, much more time in our homes. They've got to work much harder for us. So I'm very interested in using colours during the day, which are light. Often that is very often a kitchen, which people are living in and working in possibly. And then it's so good for the soul if you can shut away your screen and go into a much darker room, following the circadian rhythm, basically following nature. And then that dark room in the evening will give you a great big hug, make your shoulders go down, and you will feel, your day has ended. And that's something I'm really interested in. So now Maddie's just put up this image, which is exactly the opposite of that. No, I just think this is quite an interesting thing of people who want to use very strong colour, perhaps in a kitchen. And most people, I think, would have wanted to put a white ceiling in because it's going to make the room look lighter. No, it's not. It absolutely is not. Because the moment you put a white ceiling in there, you're comparing it to the bancher, the dark green of the walls. So it makes the walls look darker. It also, you see the shape of the room which is a disaster. It makes the ceiling height come down because you can see where the walls end and the ceiling begins.
I think you've explained it once before, almost as though you're bordering the outside of your wall.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes make your wall then
foreshorten. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this is very audacious. So we took the same colour onto the ceiling, but in gloss. And there is nothing I love more than a gloss ceiling. It bounces the light around.
I never thought I'd like this, but I love it. I think it's great.
I'm sure. Sometimes I think maybe I was brought up in a sort of pub, because I think in the old days, people always painted pubs always had painted ceilings in gloss because they could wipe down the nicotine. I mean, that was the reason.
Oh, I didn't realise that was the reason.
Yeah, no, that's the reason. But I mean, there's barely a room in my own house which hasn't got a gloss ceiling. I just love that.
And you don't smoke?
No, I don't smoke, no. But, so I mean, that was bold colour. Okay, so here, this is something quite different. This is, actually, I kept on saying no rules, but there are three things I think about when I first start looking at a room. And those three things are the light, and I'll go through this in a second, what I call the architecture, which is not probably quite right, but it's but what I'm talking about is what have I got to play with. So in this case, we've got the wood on the ceiling, we've got this slitty window above the sink, and then the other thing which I'm obsessed about is use. Got to pick colours which feel comfortable and useful to the people who live in it. I'm not going to live in it, And this room has worked really well. One, because it's a very sort of, I was going to say the word funky then, that's terrible. It's a very young East London couple who were quite into using these very intense colours. The image on the left, that part of the room is very dark, so I tried to keep it darker. There is no point in fighting nature. If you've got a dark space, go with it. So we kept that marmello, the sort of orangey colour, there to create a sort of warm, intimate space. But as you come round the corner to the image on the right, we just dropped it. Well, we didn't drop it actually. It doesn't look it here, but it's actually the same level as the top of the backsplash, but put white above it so that it just sort of opens out a bit. And then with the duster on the inside. So very much thinking about light, architecture, and the people who live in it.
Yeah.
I think what strikes me about all your choices is you're so bold. I think.
Well,
I'd be so scared to go for some of these colours.
Well, I mean, so this is what you need to do then, Cassie. See, is you keep your room very neutral, and that's what I'm always trying to encourage people to do. Not everybody loves colour, and if you don't, you start small. Don't paint your living room, that's crazy, or your kitchen. Paint, perhaps just the inside of a cupboard or a guest room, which you don't use very often. And, this is a classic case of, you open the cupboard and it kind of makes you smile, but you should shut it again and pretend it's not there.
These are brilliant sort of hints and tips of ways of being able to use colour within a space. I feel selfishly that we've got two other experts up here, and I really want to ask other questions, and they may not be related to light, but have you got any other hints and tips that from maybe being in Bath or working within your
I think just firstly on light in kitchens, it's very much, is it natural, is it artificial, how much outside light do we have? Because if it's outside light, it's obviously going to be a very different light to if we're going to be adding light in.
Okay.
So if we're adding artificial light, it could be quite a bit cooler. The light out from the outside will obviously change throughout the day, whereas if we've just got the artificial light, it will stay that same. You could dim it, but it will change those colours and the tones that you've put in that kitchen.
Yeah. So does that mean then choosing, on your far right, our far right, sorry, at the bottom, those ones with tones?
Here, yes. I mean, yes, possibly. I mean, I think this is all about sort of gut, really, when it comes to. But I mean, isn't it fabulous that the colours change during the day? I mean, I find I work a lot in the States, and Americans are very pedantic. They not so keen on the fact when I'm saying, but it's going to look fabulous in the morning, it's going to look different in the evening.
They want it to look the same.
They want it to look the same more, but I mean, that's what you're saying is what I would be embracing.
I think relating it to a kitchen, we often do two-tone kitchens as well. So just breaking up, as you say, keeping the dark lower or having a tall run as we've got behind in the dark colour. I think it helps to draw the eye between different elements of the kitchen, having them in the two tones.
Yeah, that one at the back floats, doesn't it?
It does float. It's wall hung, so it's completely held on that structure behind.
And so that means that if you've got a space there that...
Yeah, that's another way of helping the light go through. So you'll notice this island and that unit there, they're sort of off the floor, which is a way of design helping you elongate the space and create sort of light underneath and shadows underneath the furniture.
Yeah, there's something that I did want to speak to you about, Helen, because there's a project. When Helen and I first started talking about this, Helen immediately brought up the most amazing project, and why you thought this project would be a good one to bring up as a case study for our guests here today.
So this project is called Typography at the Conto, and it's in Porto in Portugal. I am so thrilled that I got an opportunity to talk about it because it literally blew me away. I don't know how many of you may have been to Porto or know of it, but obviously there's Portuguese ceramics, and the buildings in Porto are all faced in many, many different colours of ceramic tiles. It's just nothing you'd see sort of in the UK. We do get painted houses, but people are like, oh, I like that tile, and the whole facade's done in that. It's literally, it's an Instagram. Oh, it's dream. Yeah, absolute dream. If your outfit matches the tiles, it's a dream. But I can't recommend Porto enough for a weekend away with girlfriends, with boyfriends, with husbands, whatever. It's just such a great city. But where we stayed was this place, which was built in the 1920s, and it was Printworks. And in 100 years later, it was converted into a hotel. And I mean, I just think the architects have been a bit genius here because they've taken the Portuguese ceramics and put it here, but there aren't all the colours that you see in Porto. It's the whites, and I mean, the texture just speaks for itself. So they've then got their modern intervention, which is the architects particularly like using concrete.
The Printworks, was it?
Yeah, the Printworks. So they've used shallow relief text in the concrete, and Neil did spot a typo in this.
No.
Which is why he's good at the job, but a little bit annoying at times. So, so we've got the, and this goes back to my ideas about design generators and what is it that is the linchpin for the project. And if you get that right, the project is right. So here they've looked at the locality, they've looked at the tiles. They're speaking to the building's history, and they've got this, the text and the typeface. Then I love personally to see how things are made. And here we see the shuttering imprint on the concrete, which just gives it, if that had been another smooth concrete finish, it would be pretty bland. Whereas they've left the shuttering there so you can see how the hand of man has made this building.
Or woman.
Or women. But, this could all be really quite sterile and quite hard.
But they've done little things like put an elegant brass handrail in, and then
There's actually some wood on there as well in the side.
there's wood here, and I think if we go on to the next image, this image, well, that's a repeat of, sorry, the one before was a repeat of.
There does seem to be a lot more concrete coming through with buildings. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, well, you've got to be a bit careful, haven't you? Because it's not the most sustainable building material.
No.
But it does have a place. But if you flip to the next slide, you'll see that
Here, where I think it could have just been so sterile, they've brought wood in, and this is on both sides of the courtyard. And it just adds a warmth to the building that just wouldn't be there if you stuck with hard surfaces.
And they brought colour in.
I was going to say, Joa, how do you?
Well, I mean, I just love, there's just the chairs, just having.
So that's the bit that I think is just the cherry on the cake, is that then the human element. So we've got the sort of warmth, we've got the building's history, we've got the people that made it, we've got the locality, but those people that are using it and maybe aren't robots, we've got these pops of colour in the furnishings, and it's not overdone. They've been very selective about where they put it.
And it's not just the colour either. I think, did you say it was velvet that they've used? So it's the texture that you've got.
And again, velvet isn't considered a very sort of utilitarian fabric, which in this building you might lean towards that. It's just got this soft luxury that makes it really inviting as a user to use it, and really brings the human element. And then if we pop on to the, oh, not that one, this one, this is the bar area. And again, you go in here, and where the other spaces may be used more during the day, linking back to your discussions of where you're using the spaces, this is the bar area. And they've really, again, brought that colour in, which just makes it so much more approachable and human, but created this more intimate atmosphere with the textured but dark ceiling, and the texture of the tiles is just such a great choice.
The dark ceiling makes it sort of feel like it's giving you a hug, doesn't it? It's really...
And again, the timber and the walls and the panelling, and a very inviting and comfortable space.
Joa, why does that work both for like breakfast and drinks in the evening?
I mean, I don't think it's something you'd possibly do in your own home, but it's public area. Yeah, I was going to say retail, but no, public area. Yeah, but it's special. That's what, it's going to make you feel good, because it feels different and special. And I think that bright green tile, if you go on.
Well, I'm pleased you brought that up, because I slightly ruined the surprise. Anyone recognise where this is? Yes. And does anyone know who designed the colours in the nude?
Oh, that would be me. Well, there has been a mystery, which I've never known. I did do all the colours at the nude, and it's very, very ongoing, and it's a job I love, particularly because I live less than a mile from the nude. So it's a very good client, and I never knew why they approached me, and I found out today that it was through Helen. Absolutely extraordinary. I mean, really, really amazing. But it was an interesting job because the owner of the nude is very, very design conscious, and she had she wanted to have one colour. She loves Ailsa Crawford. She wanted to have one colour throughout, and I just said, you can't, you're just missing such a trick here. So let's do, I think altogether there are about 5 or 6 colours in there through the main parts, but the bedrooms are all in one little palette, which is, hold on, sorry, switch my light off, which is this palette, which is Pigeon, Mizzle and Cromarty. And the reason I chose those is because they really are susceptible to change in different light conditions, which is exactly what we want. So I've done the darker colours in the smaller spaces, the bathrooms, and the lighter colours in the bedrooms. And they're all layered up in virtually every single room. They've got 3 or, at least those 3 within them. And then also there's a different group here, which is the same but in green, which is Treron, French Grey and Eddie. And those I wanted to use because they really relate to the outside. And that is what, even though I think quite a lot of people who go to Nuke just party inside, but the idea of the hotel is that it's very related to the garden. And that's, often if I'm doing a room which is high up, especially in London houses, I might, really, it sounds so corny, but if you use a blue, it really works. You relate to the sky, or you might use a terracotta if there's loads of roofscapes. And bringing nature in and out is really important. And here I've used the same colour on the trim so that you don't get that barrier from the windows.
Which actually does lead us on to another project, because you mentioned about using colour around some of the windows and things as well, which one of these images does show. But before we go into this, I was going to ask you about pigeon, because pigeon is one of...
Not a colour I made, it was pre me.
But am I right in saying that pigeon is called pigeon because it switches from blue to green? Yes, Maddie. So actually, if you see here, Treron, the darker one, this is Treron, and this is pigeon. Treron is a green pigeon. So that's why I called it that, because really I just wanted to make a green version of pigeon. But if you put it in a room which has got loads of grass reflecting back into the room, pigeon will read green. And how does it? And then in like a darker room, so if it's north
facing, it will go much grayer with
Yeah.
a little light. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This project, we wanted to give you a real life example of a house as opposed to something like the new tour, the Portuguese named hotel that I can't pronounce. So this one in particular, Joey, you know quite well.
This is a new extension which was built onto an old schoolhouse, the home of Schoolhouse White. And these buildings are identical. They're literally millimetre identical shape and size. But obviously the one in wood feels much more contemporary. And I think they look like they're totally different sizes. But anyway, they're not, I promise. So this job for me, the architect really, really wanted to use white. I mean, really badly on the interior. Yes, so there's nothing on the exterior. On the interior, just wanted to have, for his work to show, it's his baby. He didn't want me coming and, putting horrid clothes on his baby.
What do you think? Well, I just wanted to ask, before you go on to the interior, how much input did you get on this? Because it's sympathetic, but it's quite bold to put the timber there against and not go for a more traditional detailed. Was that the architect's sort of...
Well, I've got to now admit that it is my own house. So I don't know if you're going to do that. Wasn't going to do that till the end. I wanted something very bold, and it felt. I mean, if you see all the different faces, I mean, literally the windows are the same on both buildings. It might seem like a conceit, but it felt like it would sit very happily together, and I think that they do sit happily together. It's literally in the middle of a field with this very steep hill to the left of it, and so we didn't want to upset the churchgoers, so you can't see it. We designed this building specifically so you can't see it from anywhere but within the garden. But the architect really wanted it to be white, and he had the wrong client.
I do feel like we're going behind the scenes into Joa Studholme at the moment.
I just wanted to explain, because we spent a lot of time talking to each other, and obviously I got my own way, but the halls on the picture on the left, that's painted in a colour called setting plaster, and the reason I did that was because it felt like it's very related to the stone. It doesn't feel like a colour in your face. It feels like, these passages, these links you walk through feel much more like a kind of material than a paint colour. Whereas the central one is, this is the window, you can't quite see, it's just to the right, is literally the hill is coming down into the window. So we painted this very strong colour, sap green, so it feels like you're absolutely sort of in the field, and it gives my guests a kind of treat. You might not want to live in it all the time, but it certainly gives you a treat. And there you've got a pink gloss ceiling again. And then the one on the right is the only room upstairs, which just has the most extraordinary views. And it's difficult to see here, but if you see just behind the dog, my dog, the reveals of the windows are all painted in green, so that it just gives you that. This is Stir-About, this colour I'm crazy about, the glowing neutral, but the green just gives you that inside-outside connection, which is, I think, is very helpful. So there's no furniture in that room at that point. And then this is just the old part of the house, very old, because this room isn't even a kitchen anymore. But it's just to show we've done the same thing, this putting some yellow this time on the inside of the window revealed, because it really makes this room feel sunny. I mean, it seems crazy. And Helen, you brought up a good thing about...
Yeah, well, I worked on a project last year and it was kind of a revisit, and they had a bathroom with a lovely vaulted ceiling and then lots of furniture at low level and nothing related to that vaulted ceiling. And it was kind of like, why bother if you're then just going to put a lot of low level joinery and not point an arrow at it? And I just sort of feel that I'm a bit obsessed looking at that image, that does it all, and really explains the shape of the space and draws attention to it.
And it's not the yellow. It's not the yellow that I think you'd expect to use.
No, it's called, I mean, that's a new colour called Duster. I mean, that's my poor husband. I mean, no, this room was painted, I mean, I don't know, 10 times in 2 years. But we just kept on trying, always with Schoolhouse Out. But yeah, these were all the new colours which were influenced by kind of things which you see all the time, like dusters and jelly and all these kind of things.
That's very. And what room is it now? If it's not your
now
kitchen,
my sitting room.
Is it?
Mm.
So is it the same colour?
Yeah. What?
No.
No.
What colour have you painted it?
It's now Bancher.
Is it? As in the green
Really
that we saw
dark
with
green
the gloss
with the
ceiling.
gloss ceiling. Yeah, it's not that room.
No, but what have you done to the ceiling?
It's completely Bancher, every single element.
Oh, this is very exciting. Have you painted those beams?
Yep.
Are they Bancher?
Yep.
Anyone else got any questions?
It's very, very, very strong. But this room is very dark anyway. And we only go in it, in the evening, or if we have guests. Unfortunately, so many people live like that, don't they? They don't go in their living rooms really. And we now live in the kitchen all the time.
And what colour is your sofa? If the room
Right, so like one of them, Maddie, is sort of beigey colour, and the other is a dark red. It sounds very Christmassy, but
it sounds fascinating. Well, we are coming to the point which I thought it would be quite useful. We've spoken about some amazing finished projects, but we thought it'd be quite interesting to talk about some projects that we've got that are currently underway, and sort of give you a insight into the process, but from each person's perspective. So in order to make sure we've got enough time for questions, we can probably start with this one. And actually, this was one of yours, wasn't it? This was one that's underway.
So this is a barn that we were approached to turn into a kitchen living space. So there's a sort of more historic building, and then this is on the end. And actually, in their home, they've got quite a conventional, traditional small kitchen, but this vast space here. But if you're looking for texture, this building's got it. It's the beautiful sort of bricks, small format, and the tiles. And then if we look at
I just want to sort of draw people's attention here to how straight the roof is.
Yeah, but that's the challenge is to take. I mean, we can get into architectural challenges of make this suitable for 21st century living. I have to say this is where I would get Neil very firmly involved in making sure that it still stood up at the end of our interventions. But when we were talking about this talk, I thought, what buildings are we working on and how do you bring texture in? And this one just came to mind because, it's literally got texture in spades, and that can be as challenging. How do you do that and work with that without just going for contrasts? And also, in terms of colour, how do you use colour in such a big space like this? Do you go with neutrals? My sort of approach would be to anything that's sort of stuck to the building, go with the colour tones that link to the texture of the wood and the brick, and then use colour within sort of more movable items or furnishings. Yeah.
This is the overhead structure, which you can see is kicking about. We've got the big barn doors and we've got a side aisle here.
And some lovely straight walls at the top that I can see.
And quite complex, but how do you drop in, you know, the natural thing as an architect is to drop in a nice straight wall inside, to which we would have to upgrade the thermal properties, but how do we do that, and what material would that be, and how do we allow the structure that's there to breathe? And, you know, that is what this is all about. How do we deal with that? There would be a lot of potential steel repair, repairs done to it, and, you know, do we hide them? Do we try and, or do we express that, and do we use some colour to express that? I'm not going to paint it red. That's all I'll say. But also, it's a big area, and how do you? It'll be really interesting to see what you've come up with how you would plan it. I mean, we would be looking at axes and light, but also how do you deal with a floor space which is so vast for an area that is going to be used by a family?
I think to start with, one of my first questions would be, what is this space going to be? Is it just going to be the kitchen? It looks quite large, so I imagine it would be sort of kitchen living as well. And then it would really be plotting what ends they want to be with. Have they got windows at the top? Is that windows at the top?
Well, this is big barn doors. There's some little pokey windows, again, you know, in that nice crooked roof, which of course we would not take all the charm out, but we would solve some of those problems, and we'd probably be bringing light in from down below. And I think when we looked at it, you know, we looked at this wall as not one of the original ones, and whether we would then bring a lot of light in from the side. But you've got a big ceiling.
Yeah, I'd want to be there, would be my initial thought, is I'd want to see where those beams are going to be falling and what it's going to be over. And I think I'd also want to just sort of get an understanding of how that space is when you're stood there. I think it could be quite dramatic. And I think from that photo that you had of the beams, there's a lot of shapes going on there. So I think I'd kind of want to play on that with the furniture that you choose, whether you could do sort of an interesting shaped island with a bit of the diagonals and the almost kind of the crookedness that you've got, whether you actually go for something that's really dead straight and play with that, or that you try and follow those lines that you've got. But in terms of where it's going to be plotted, I think that's really a conversation that I'd have with the client on what do you want to be over? Do you want some lights to hang from sort of somewhere, or what do you want to be sort of near?
And how do you design a kitchen which is generally straight? Like, in order for drawers to run, it's got to be straight. How do you run something straight against something that is intrinsically not straight? But actually, like Helen says, you want to keep the charm. A builder's like their favourite scenario.
You can do dead straight islands, so like we've got here, or you can do ones that have slight angles to them, and then when you open them, they've got slightly different depths drawers within. I think it's just how bespoke you go with this, or whether it is something that is sort of a standard size and shape that we've got, or whether it would be more bespoke.
I think it feels that this space does very much lend itself to a bull top style, where it's sort of simple lines, but also the elements you were talking about where it floats, or it feels like it's not built into the structure like a shaker kitchen may do. It's something that is placed there.
Yeah, and I think something on islands could be really dramatic. It is almost like you've not just dumped it, but it is just plotted there, and it's almost sort of thinking like, oh, what's going on here? We've got this going on up there, we've got this going on with the island. It's so much interest that's not your normal kitchen. I think it would
quite sculptural. And then when it comes to a line that isn't straight and putting something that's straight against it, do you try and put it flush against it, or do you try and leave a shadow gap?
It depends what kitchen you'd go for. I think if we were going down our more craftsman's route, and it is the more bespoke traditional style with your cornice and the detailing, I think I would be more inclined to sort of follow the curves and cut it in properly. But if it's a ball top, I think why not exaggerate the fact that it's completely different, have really dead straight lines and really exaggerate it.
I mean, it's a gem of a building, isn't it? I would say, if you notice the colour in this building, we've failed.
That's so interesting.
I mean, I really would. You know, you just do not want to be conscious of it. You've got other better things to look at. I mean, I would start by looking at the colour of the brick, the colour of the mortar, you know, and bring in that way. So it would probably be in the Joas White, that group, and the red base neutrals. But you just don't want to see the colour. You've got, you know, your beautiful placed kitchen or whatever. You don't want to be aware of it.
And beams, are there any sort of
Well,
suggestions?
presumably you're not painting them, are you? So shock horror.
It would be very difficult to paint all that. I mean, one thing I've learned from experience is, painting beams with woodworm in as well doesn't really work.
I mean, I think, I don't know if this is a rule, but it is generally, if you are painting beams, it's more successful to paint them a slightly darker tone than the ceiling rather than the other way around. It just sort of sits better, really. Again, any of these groups would come into play.
But I feel like there's a graduation of materiality in this building where the existing is so quirky and characterful, and then we've talked about the ball top at the other end of the items that's placed, and it links back to sort of the Typografia de Conto, which I don't know if I'm saying that right either. But I can imagine the pops of colour or the velvet, but you've got to not have the contrast so stark that it looks alien. So that's where I think things like a textured concrete floor finish.
Styling at the end would really make it sing. I think the sort of throws that you can put over chairs and things like that would soften it slightly.
But you've got to get there in stages, and so things like the floor, like the texture you would use on the walls, having a finish with a texture in it. I mean, this is like micro cement, so that's quite fine, but there are other samples around that you could use a sort of Clayworks plaster finish, which would be much more harmonious with the building, and I think would tell that tale of all the structure being anchoring it, and then the human element being things which sort of can come in and out. You can, but in our proposal, we created a glass link between the house and the barn, and you come in this way. So so this all got reworked, and you actually would enter here, but painfully aware of the strong axes, and this is looking towards where a swimming pool then became, and there was a lot to relate to on that.
Because I think that one of the things I often think about with colour is, when obviously that room is not going to be light, and so one of the ways to make it light through colour would have been had a kind of little foyer, as the Americans would say, a little porch, a small hall, to make that darker, so that when you pass through it, you go into that room and it feels lighter. And that, I mean, it's so easy to do in a kind of typical Victorian house or something. When you come through the front door and you get some strong colour. And then you're like a moth to a flame to the kitchen at the back, going into the light. And that would have been a way, but obviously you can't do that here.
But what keeps me awake at night is the ceiling, is the roof, and in terms of not peppering it with skylights, which, we have clients which literally are like, give me 10 more, give me. And that relates back to if it's dark, let it be dark.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot fight nature, I think. Hence my dark green sitting room.
Well, I love the sound of that and the colour of the sofas. I've got many more questions, as you can imagine, on the intricacies of that living room. However, I think that it would be very remiss of me not to be able to ask our audience for some questions, given that we've got such extraordinary people here. And I have a few that got sent in via email, but I wondered if there was anybody else that had a question that they might want to raise at this point. Oh, yes, Amanda.
I'd like to ask how you choose the names, because I think that is a lot of names. I was telling some people this earlier. My kids made me go down a ski run that was called Lucifer. And I think the clue was in the name. So I'm looking at it, and my other half's picked dead salmon as the colour of the kitchen, and I can't get my head round.
Well, it's just because it's called dead salmon. Is that what you mean?
So tell me about the names. Why?
Well, I mean, dead salmon. Actually, that particular name is just dead refers to the finish. So it came from a bill or an invoice from Kedleston Hall from 18 something. And the painter had written, painted this room in dead salmon, meaning dead flat, and the colour being salmon. So we just picked it from there. But I mean, there is always good reason. They're not just sort of the colour names are not done for fun, because they're really, really important. Although I got busted about my children just now. I did name a colour after my daughter's pink cheeks, but it kind of felt relevant at the time. She's not so happy about it now, she's 30.
It's Nancy's blushes.
And Nancy's blushes, but it's, sometimes the name comes first. Thank you so much. Sometimes, like as I was saying in this last set of new colours, there's a colour called Duster. And that's when I looked at the colour, it felt exactly, I remember folding dusters for my mother when I was a small child. But it just feels right, that name, because it's not at all challenging. So, yeah, they come from all sorts of different ways.
Mouse is back.
Mouse is back, not me, pre-me. I think it's just the colour of a mouse is back. Yeah.
It's better that it's not dead mouse is back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, incidentally, one of my absolutely favourite colours, mouse is back. It's, it's just not made by me. But yeah, it's an excellent colour.
But dead salmon for a kitchen. Joa's, which room in your house is painted dead salmon?
Another sitting room.
Another sitting room. I'm making it sound. I'm also making it sound a bit stalkerish, aren't I?
But with Tannis brown on the trim, so it's like some Sherlock Holmes's lair. Very, very dark.
It's really evocative though, isn't it? Like the memories you said of Duster. I know exactly what you mean in my mind.
Yeah, and it's a lot about nostalgia.
But it also makes it so easy to remember as designers. Yeah. And it's amazing how many companies have basically copied this now, haven't they? Because it's much easier to remember that than colour 283.
Yeah, little green and near impossible. Green number 1. Very challenging.
So, Honey, I had another point. Your question about why don't architects choose colour. I think that a lot of us have been taught that the natural things, so wood is a colour and like bricks are a colour. So we don't often choose colour because we're trying to embrace natural materials, and I think we're probably taught to express the details, and that's why colour doesn't come into it, I think.
Well, and I have to say that I do have a client at the back there that I think would say that I'm pretty happy with colour, am I not?
Trust me, this architect's very happy with colour.
And if we were a bit further along in the project, I'd have loved to have put it up here tonight, maybe next year. It goes right back to the whole design generator, and Jo over there is a landscape designer, and the colours she's put into her garden are just so incredible that's just driven what we've chosen, and we're bringing them through the house, which fingers crossed will, I think Jo might have a question.
Sorry, Jo, were you about to
No,
say
no,
that?
I'm
just going to ask all three of you, I know the answer from Helen already, but for everybody, but to what extent do you, as people working, well, particularly you do, on the interior of a house, collaborate with garden designers, for example, or perhaps, if they're not changing the garden, do you take into account, I know, Jo, obviously you've mentioned your own home.
100%. So they're going back to this thing about how do I choose colours not so quickly, because that sounds like, it is, but the process is fast. So I have got to look at something. So you look at what somebody's wearing. You're looking at their, if it's in town, at their front garden. Certainly what's in the garden, and to see what they like, and also that inside-outside thing. There's so many kitchens sort of have doors which open into the.
I think cohesion between all three of us is really important, and I think it's just the stages of the design that we work through, and making sure that we are all understanding what the other person's trying to achieve. I think for you, Helen, it would be what do you want that building to talk about? What windows do you want to be able to see through? We don't want to put something in front of that, and all of those things we need to take into account and make sure that we've spoken about those, and then that leads on to what we've designed for your kitchen and bathroom interior, and then how the colours are going to impact that.
And the view that you look out towards.
Yes.
Because actually,
often I just will even take, like if you've got quite a strong colour in a room, and often say to the client, just paint a pot or watering can or a bird house or something small, and put that colour in the garden, and it just gets your mind going back and forth. I mean, it's this little tiny thing, but then it just connects the two spaces together.
Just a quick one. I'm an interior designer. I'm a marriage counsellor, it would seem. Who seem to think that there's two ways that you can either go into every single room and they can have a different language, a different personality. So you can open a door and suddenly it's dark, open another one it's light. And there's another train of thought, generally the female, it would seem, that you need to have a palette across the house. And that it could be a neutral palette, it could be you pick up blue in every room, but that there needs to be a connection between all of the rooms. Just wondered what your thoughts were on those two options.
Sorry, Joa, that is a you question.
Oh yeah, the F word, flow. Well, I mean, if I'm trying to think about a house which you can drift seamlessly around, it's usually about the hall, isn't it? You know, I think that's the connector. And I always think about rooms floor by floor. So if you stand in the hall, if the hall is very strong, it gives you license for all the rooms off it to be very neutral. And I love that, going off a dark hall into a light room like that. On the other hand, you might want to have a very neutral hall, which doesn't really work for me. But if you are doing that, then perhaps if you're standing in that hall, you want to look into, say, 3 rooms, and they should be of the same weight, the same density of colour. You know, not one very dark, one very light, because then it really feels odd, I think, walking around the house. So it's about sight lines for me. It's a really, really important thing. I know this thing about sort of picking up a colour. I mean, I do the ribbon of colour. I'd forgotten about that. So that was a big thing also a few years ago, when railings, which is a very dark grey, was very, very popular. Often, we would put it on the spindles of the staircase, and then maybe on the island in the kitchen, and then maybe that would go onto the back of the bookcases in the living room. So we would take a colour round as a sort of little gentle reminder of where you are. I'm not sure I've answered your question. I'm thinking about it.
Just to pitch in there that we, interestingly, on our Instagram feed, the images that seem to get a lot of traction are ones where you see a sequence of rooms. And I think that's so important when you're designing, that you're thinking about that. And we do not do colour samples on walls anymore. We do A1 boards with the colours, and then we can move them around the rooms on the different walls, but also sit in one room, place the colour of the next and the next. So, because that's the fun bit too, isn't it? Seeing those colours together. So, but yes, bearing in mind I work with my husband and we work with couples. Marriage guidance is also in our repertoire.
So that means the red thread is dead. There's no threads going through.
No, I mean, of course there can be. I mean, it's a delightful way of decorating, actually, is to keep picking up on something. Maybe it's just the cushions or whatever. But I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think that's what you were asking, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not that interested in flow, as you might have noticed. I'm more interested in each room, speaking for itself. And lots of people feel really uncomfortable about the trim colour changing from room to room, because what do you do in the door jamb? But you see it all the time. Virtually every front door is a different colour on the front and the back, and nobody worries about that. It's just, just got to embrace it.
That's a good thing to say next time someone says, I can't do that because of that reason. Yeah. I think we've probably got time for one more question. Yeah.
Hi. Can you talk us through the process, albeit probably quite brief in time, of how you create new colours?
Any other questions? Yeah.
So from today and what you guys have said, is it less a fear of colour and more a fear of being dated? Because we obviously, from my memory of an idea of that is you buy these buildings that you have to retrofit and go in and refurbish, and it's always the dreaded green bathroom where everything was green and it was that sort of sagey colour, and now you have these trends that go up and down. Is it more the fear of being dated than it is actually colour being used?
I think the word trend sticks out to me because trend does really come and go. I think if you try to follow something, then it will go quite quickly. So yeah, to answer your question, probably yes. I think we are designing to not follow those trends, to try and go for something which has longevity and will last a long time.
Yeah, I think you're right. We don't want things to look dated, but again, if you go back to the design generator, you get it right and it relates to the context. I don't think it overly matters which estate the neutral basis you use, but if it's the right one for the property, you're going to keep it. And actually, there's a property that I worked on in 2011 that Joe did the colours for, and I mean, this was a bold colour that was put in the drawing room. It's got low ceiling, it's dark. I think it was in Cheera blue. It's definitely one of those dark deep blues. And the client said that she goes in there and it's like a cocoon. So they come from London, it's that's the country retreat. She goes in there and she relaxes and she falls asleep invariably. And we've redone the colours there, you did, and it stayed the same because it was right. Yeah, because it was right. I think you're right. Nobody wants things to look dated, and these things are big investments, aren't they? It's time, money. But I do think if you get it right, you've got the right concept, then it'll last.
One last question. Yes, Holly.
I was going to ask a bit about trust. So I work for a stone company, and a lot of how we work with architects, designers, or whoever is about our knowledge about the stone, because stone can be a bit scary for people who don't work with it all the time. But I think colour has a bit of a misconception that it's very attainable, isn't it? Everyone's got an opinion about colour, which is fine. So how do you get your customers to trust your opinion, especially when you're describing things as dead salmon? You described a project earlier as projects that shouldn't, colours that shouldn't go together, but they just do. And how do you make them trust that that's going to work?
Yeah. What about clients that doubt you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways that we kind of tackle it. I think we try and sort of engage with our clients to see if there's any similarities and sort of relate to them on that first level. And then I think we also, a lot of how we design kitchens and bathrooms, it does come down to not just the colours and things, but also the layout and how it functions. So a client might come to us and say, this is what I want, but we don't always stick to that. So we sometimes go away and think, actually, I don't think that's the best solution. We'll have another look at it. But the real important bit is making sure that we get them to understand why we've reached that conclusion, and making sure that we step by step go through why we've done it a certain way.
I might just jump in there actually, because I'm not a designer, Cassie is, and there was a specific scenario where a client wanted one of the, almost like a Sub-Zero fridge like that. Sorry team that sat in front of the Sub-Zero fridge, if you could just show it off beautifully, thank you. They wanted that in their kitchen, and it was a townhouse, very, very small kitchen, and I don't remember you ever saying, I don't think you should have that fridge. But what you did do was almost you did overlays of that kitchen with various different layouts, and then explained why it would force like the dishwasher to be by the door. And then when you open that, that becomes almost like an assault course for people, which she didn't want an assault course, did she?
Yeah, it kind of comes back to the idea of you only really notice the practical elements of design when it's wrong. I think if you've got a dishwasher that you open and it's in the way, then you're only going to notice that when it's wrong. So a lot of what we do is, it's not as noticeable as the end product. I think how we design it's really intrinsic to how you're going to use it, how it's going to function. A lot of it just comes down to how it works as well as how it looks at the end.
Yeah, that trust almost comes from you showing them why that won't work without telling them it won't work. Sorry, Joey,
it's something I say a lot, or I think a lot, is that you don't notice colours if they're right, you only notice them when they're wrong. And people say, that I'd say there are 11 colours in this room. I mean, these are more historic rooms. And I go, what? So yeah, there are 11 colours in there, but you can't notice them because they're right. And it's when they're wrong you notice.
Well, I think that's a lovely note to finish. I'm aware of time, but we've got plenty of mulled wine, plenty of cake and things like that downstairs. Burton May, a tile company, Carpietra, Holly mentioned what she does as well there with all their finishes. There's lots of those sorts of things around. We've got Joa, Cassie and Helen who are here to answer any questions on a one-by-one basis for the next kind of 20 minutes or so. But I'd just like to finish by saying a huge thank you to you all for coming and a massive thank you to our extraordinary panel. Thank you so much, and thank you to Hobson's Choice. So round of applause, please. Thank you very much.